I feel you shouldn't have to suffer a violent relationship. Don't let it carry on. You don't deserve it. Please ask for help. You have to think of yourself, your health, and your happiness. Why suffer in silence? Don't feel ashamed or guilty. Ask someone for help. Now.
That was Ali. In today's programme, we examine the issue of violence, the kind of violence which Ali and thousands of other deaf women have suffered. Later, we'll also be discussing what you can do about it, if it's happening to you or to someone you know. The popular perception of violent crime tends to be of an assault by a stranger in the street. Many people are afraid to go out at night. But the 1992 British Crime Survey showed that the most common form of assault takes place behind closed doors, in the home, and overwhelmingly it is committed by men against women.
When he first hit me, I was shocked. We'd only just got married. I felt awful. I couldn't tell anyone that he'd beaten me up. They would think I'd married the wrong man and tell me I should have waited till I got to know him better. I had no idea he was like that. After we got married, he just changed. I felt trapped.
It's important to get rid of another stereotype, that domestic violence only happens in poor households. It can happen anywhere. Deaf social worker Rosemary Ottaway has had first-hand experience.
I think there's a popular myth or belief that domestic violence happens in rough, working-class families, and it doesn't happen in middle-class homes. That's not true. Research has proved that it can happen to anybody, irrespective of age, religion, or social class. Domestic violence affects everyone across the board.
I decided to talk with my face in darkness because I'm terrified of being recognised and attacked. I'm always living in fear. Living in a small community and even going to larger gatherings, I'm terrified of seeing him again. It makes me sick with worry. It's so dangerous.
Ali was prepared to talk about her experience, but she had to conceal her identity for fear of reprisals. But there are many other deaf women who still feel too threatened to talk in public. In the hearing world, this issue has been discussed more openly in recent years. In the deaf community, it's harder to hide or escape.
When deaf women ask for help, please help them. Remember the enormity of what they've been through. The support we can give is safety, that's a priority, safe accommodation, and practical things, financial support, food, baby clothes, baby milk, everything, housing support. Maybe a deaf woman will have to move house. You know, it's a big step for them at a time when they're at their weakest, yet they need to escape. They may need to see the police, have medical reports, contact welfare, benefits. They'll need money, possibly income support, access to a solicitor if they decide they want a separation. Women's support groups are really important.
I've talked to a number of women who've had violent partners. But for one reason or another, they don't feel able to appear. The experience of each is different. but certain patterns emerge when we look at their stories. We've chosen extracts from what they told us that together create a composite picture of this common experience, one that is suffered by as many as one woman out of every 4. Their testimony will be relayed by 2 deaf presenters, Rita McDade and Fiona Stewart.
I'm Fiona Stewart.
And I'm Rita McDade.
We would like to stress that Rita and Fiona are not talking about their own experiences, but those of 4 other women. We'll call them A, B, C and D. The first thing that emerges is that in each case, the relationship did not start off as a violent one. But at a certain point, usually soon after marriage, the man's behaviour changed.
My boyfriend and I courted from when I was 12 till I was 17. There was no violence, it was a great romance. We got married when I was 17. We lived with his mother and his sister. After about 3 months, he started to lose his temper in a way I'd never seen him do before.
I went out with a deaf man after leaving school. He was a great person and we always had a good laugh together. Eventually we got married. After we got married he changed. He started to give me less attention. He drank more and I began to feel used. He just changed. I was basically being used to satisfy his needs.
He was violent when he'd been drinking. I tried to defend myself and my children by cowering in a corner with my arms up to protect my face, but I still ended up with broken bones.
In each case, marriage seems to have given the man the feeling that he could do what he liked. As the inhibitions slipped, disrespect, neglect, bossiness and bullying sooner or later degenerated into physical violence.
We had a lot of arguments and he became more violent. He started hitting me. I tried to walk away from the arguments and ignore him, but he hit me to force me to listen to him.
If there's football on the television and his favourite team loses, I get the blame and he beats me up. Even if they draw, there's still a risk of being beaten.
It starts off with verbal abuse, calling me names, trying to provoke an argument. Then he starts hitting me, he beats me up. And to finish off, he demands sex, violent sex. He rapes me.
I was in the kitchen peeling the potatoes to make the chips when he came home. I called him for something and he lost his temper because his dinner wasn't ready. He picked up a knife and threw it at me. I flung my arms around my head and the knife went into my arm. I was screaming and screaming. His sister pulled the knife out of my arm and I passed out.
The first time he hit me, I was just shocked. He apologised and said it would never ever happen again, so I believed him. I thought it was a one-off thing, though I didn't know why he'd done it. But I forgave him and gave him another chance. I gave him so many chances, but he broke all his promises. The first time he beat me, you could see the bruises, but after that, he became more subtle. He's hit me and punched me, where the bruises wouldn't show. Added to that, he'd be verbally abusing me, calling me names, calling me stupid, putting me down. I didn't realise just how damaging those put-downs were, till now.
The cycle of violence is often hard to break because the man exercises almost total control over her life. He puts her down and intimidates her in all sorts of ways. For far too long, many women are frightened, humiliated, and often ashamed to tell anyone what is happening.
I'd saved what money I could to buy decent clothes, but he used to tear them or cut them up with scissors. So I'd go into the office and feel really embarrassed because I looked so scruffy.
His drinking got worse and his demands were impossible to deal with. He used to give me very little money to manage on. In the bedroom, he just used me for his own satisfaction.
Like all bullies, the violent partner thrives on silence and secrecy. Often, respite has only come to the woman when she has felt able or compelled to tell other people and ask for help and get support.
I left him when I had the baby. I feared for the baby's life. It could have been the next victim. I went to stay at a friend's house. My husband came over and begged me to come back home. He promised to change his ways, but I stood firm. The violence was too much for me to handle with our young baby.
Finally, after another beating, I managed to confide my secret to a close friend. She advised me to tell my mother. So, after a lot of hard thinking, I did. I was crying when I told her. So I took the children, left home, and stayed with friends for a few months. I found peace of mind, was less nervous, less panicky. I felt safe and I could now see a future. I decided to divorce him.
I'd put up with this abuse for years, until one day something inside me just changed. I just snapped, and I knew that was it. I'd had enough. I wasn't giving him any more chances. That was it. For the first time, I told my family, and they gave me an incredible amount of support. They said that I should have told them before. They had their suspicions, but didn't like to interfere with my marriage. I had wanted their support, but at the same time, I was ashamed of admitting something was wrong, that they might think it was me, but they knew it wasn't. Their support was so important. With that, I was actually able to leave him.
Sharing the suffering and pain of an abusive relationship with family and friends can help lead to solutions. But what about the wider community? What can we do to help those who have survived violent relationships? After the break, join us here in Glasgow, where we'll be looking at the need for more deaf women's support groups. It's obvious from what we've seen in part 1 that deaf women who have suffered domestic violence need a lot of help and support. At the end of the programme, we'll be giving out some Minicom helpline numbers, so make sure you have a pen and paper ready. There are other ways in which women can support each other. One deaf woman I talked to, who is still trapped in a violent marriage, explained why.
Deaf women are not as supportive as they should be. I would like a deaf women's support group, where we can talk openly and confidentially about our situation, and where we don't need to worry that it might be repeated outside the group.
The St Vincent Centre for Deaf People here in Glasgow is one of the few places where such a group was set up a few years ago. The issue of violence in the home and the need to do something about it was one of the main reasons the group was originally formed.
There are women who say they love their husbands or partners even though they're violent. It's terrible. They say love is blind. Even when her confidence is at rock bottom, she still says she loves him. What is love? Does he love you? He abuses you. Is that love? What does love mean? He gets away with it, buys you flowers, says how stupid he was to have kicked and thumped you, and he doesn't know why he did it. And he's really sorry. And she thinks, oh, he does love me. It's a big con.
Violence isn't always visible. She may look okay, but she may be emotionally bruised. Oh, there are obvious signs, black eyes, that we all recognise, but there are other forms of hidden abuse that we never see. Verbal abuse, for example. On the outside, she seems fine, but he's constantly swearing at her. Deaf people who see it think it's okay, but it's not. It's wrong. It destroys the woman.
Deaf women are doubly discriminated against. They grow up oppressed by hearing people. Then you marry a deaf man and suffer abuse there. When you think you've escaped him and moved away, you meet his friends at another deaf club. The deaf world's so small, there's no escape. It wouldn't make any difference if you moved from Scotland to England. Your husband's friends would tell him exactly where you are. For deaf women to find refuge from it all is absolutely impossible.
A few years ago, the group took a further step in its attempts to help and support other women. It made a video about a number of issues, including domestic violence.
This is called child sexual abuse. Now, domestic violence. And what does this mean? It could be a husband and wife or partners being together. For example, the husband could come home from work and see that the wife hasn't made the tea and could absolutely blow a fuse and be really aggressive and nasty. The woman quite often thinks, oh yes, he's right and I'm wrong. I should have made the tea. Now, it's not your fault. Most deaf people think this is just a minor form of abuse, but it's not.
For deaf women, I think the video was really helpful. One by one, they come out and disclosed their abusive relationships. If we hadn't made it, I don't think those deaf women would have spoken out.
Earlier this year, members of the Deaf Women's Support Group were involved in the making of another video, A Person Again. It was produced by the Rutherglen Unemployed and Community Resource Centre Hearing Women's Group and translated throughout by members of the Deaf Women's Support Group.
So at that time I was just a wreck. I had nothing, I had no self-confidence and I didn't know where to turn. My mother, she stayed round the corner, but it would only harass my family and they wouldn't get peace to live, so I tended to hide a lot of that from my family. At the end up, I didn't know anything about Glasgow Women's Aid and I went to a social worker and the social worker gave me the phone number for Women's Aid.
Since the 1970s, hearing women have put together a network of women's aid groups throughout Britain. They've given support to hundreds of thousands of women and children escaping domestic violence. There are now nearly 300 women's refuges in the UK, where women and children can go to escape violence at home.
The Women's Refuge had no publicity suitable for deaf women because they hadn't had any deaf awareness training. If we'd received some funding, we could have publicised their centre and made them aware of our needs. Till now, we haven't received any funding, so they are ignorant to our needs. We have to make them aware, but without funding, it's impossible.
knew a woman who suffered domestic violence. She went to the refuge only to find there was no flashing lights, no minicom, no teletext TV, and that made her feel even more isolated. So we decided and planned and got some emergency money to buy a teletext TV and a minicom. Flashing lights and other necessities we haven't got yet because of lack of funds, but we'll find a way of getting it. We think that all deaf groups should have an emergency package with minicoms, TVs, flashing lights for fires or doors, etc. So, if a deaf woman who is suffering from domestic violence does come to them, they can borrow it.
No woman should have to suffer in secret. If you need help or advice, or if you would like to know more about the help available, there are 2 minicom numbers you can call. The BDA helpline is open today from now until 5 p.m, Monday to Friday from 9 till 4, and Wednesday evening from 7 till 10. The National Women's Aid Federation Minicom helpline is open today from now till 4:30, Monday to Friday from 10 till 2, and Wednesday evening from 7 till 10. Here are the numbers. The BDA 01270 250 743 and the Women's Aid 0345 023 468. You can also find these numbers on Deaf View on Channel 4 Teletext page 685 and in the sign-on information pages in the November issue of British Deaf News. If you would like us to send you a free copy of that information, write to this address. Sign On, Violence, Tyne-Tees Television, City Road, Newcastle upon Tyne, NE1 2AL. But don't forget there are things you can do, we can do, in the deaf community now, to try to reduce this problem, to support others, or to escape from a violent situation ourselves. We leave you with some of the advice from the women we've talked to in the making of this programme.
If your partner is abusive, don't let it continue. You don't deserve it. You only have one life to live. Find other women who are in a similar position for support and advice, and, if you need to, divorce him.
Don't be afraid to get help from your family, friends, or deaf organisations. There should be a group for deaf, battered women. We need deaf women's support groups.
I think women should speak out. Men always get away with it. If women spoke out, men would panic because other women would say, "Look at him, an abuser, shame on you," and the women would feel better. I think you should do something to break the silence. If not, it destroys you and men gain more power, thinking women will never do anything about it. But women can become powerful. It's 1996. We should redress that balance. I hope so.
Now I feel at peace. I feel happy. I can laugh and enjoy myself. There's no more abuse, no more name-calling, no more violence. I'm coming back to my old self. I'm a person again. People look at me and say, "You're just how you used to be." And that's because I'm no longer abused. I've escaped. And I'm at peace.